everybody eat. Don't sit here. Just go ahead and eat. I've talked over eating for as long as I've been on the radio. I assume most of the time I'm talking, people are eating anyway. I don't want your food to get cold. And I eat like a 5th grade boy, so I had donuts in the car. Popping those things up. I was in Phoenix last night for a different event, and was so happy to be invited to come up and talk on behalf of Jonathan and be back together with Paul. But I got to tell you, as soon as I walked in, I looked down, Angie's wearing her boots, Jonathan's wearing her boots, Paul's wearing her boots, you're probably all wearing boots. I have on my black loafers, and it sort of says, here comes a California. Kick 'em. And so, but I've been in Prescott before with Dr. Paul last time around, and then we came back up with Governor Brewer, Bash Paul, and I just love driving around up here. I think it is so different from California and so much more fun. But I want to tell you a little story about tonight. I'm going to fly back this afternoon. We're going to do another event over in Sedona. I'm going to go to dinner with a new friend. How many of you watched Everybody Loves Raymond? Everybody Loves Raymond. You like that a lot, do you? Well, Patty Heaton is a new friend of mine, and I'm going to go over to her house tonight. It's their anniversary, and what I love about this country is that Patty Heaton is a Cleveland girl, and I'm a Warren, Ohio boy. We're from northeastern Ohio. Her dad was the Cleveland Plain Dealer sports editor growing up, so I read her dad's column all the time. So we just connected at a Romney event over there. We started talking, we became friends. And I am amused that one Cleveland, Ohio girl goes off and becomes this very big famous star, and another Cleveland, Ohio boy goes off and ends up on the radio, and I come to Arizona and I find a veteran and a dentist, and they're going to go represent Congress, and I'm sure you all have interesting stories. This is an amazing country. Anyone can go anywhere and do anything, anytime they want to. And how many of you have kids? Children? You know, they may end up close at hand, they may end up far, far away. Whatever they do, they may be in the military, they may be civilian. But it's just an amazing country, at least it has been. And I think what this election is primarily about is whether or not mobility of the sort we're used to and freedom of the sort that we take for granted is going to remain in place, because we're headed towards a European system. A European system that basically kills mobility and economic growth by freezing everyone in place, not being able to move, loading up a generation with debt, crippling our position in the world. One of the reasons I'm happy to do this for Jonathan is that I'm a civilian, I don't end up in the military, but I got a son-in-law in the Navy. He's at sea right now with another carrier, the F-18 pilot. And they are off the coast of Japan. As China surges forces off of those islands south of Japan, we've sent 2 carriers there. And people don't even know about this, but we have a very tense situation in the South China Sea right now. And so I stay in touch with him. My granddaughter and my daughter are on with us while he's deployed. And I'm just amazed that people don't know we're going to cut $1 trillion out of the American military under this president. And he hasn't said anything on the campaign trail. It's astonishing. The cuts that Secretary Gates oversaw were deep. Some people think they were necessary. I think they were pretty extreme, but at least they were overseen by Secretary Gates. And then the president has agreed to another $1 trillion, which means 20,000 Marines, 80,000 Army troops, the further extension of the F-35, a decrease in our shipbuilding, basically the impairment of American power around the world. The kind of American power that can say, Jonathan, 20,000 miles in the middle of the Iraqi desert, and then we would leave. That requires funding. It requires the kind of commitment that Paul stands for, and that Speaker Boehner stands for, and that Mitt Romney stands for. And I know that Ann doesn't. She's not pro-military. Nancy Pelosi's come to support her, for goodness sake. I hope you guys get billboards for Nancy Pelosi with Ann Kirkpatrick and put her up here on the highway. Of course, billboards cost money. And I always tell the story of fundraisers, and Ty heard this last night, and tell you at Paul's report. When I was a young lawyer in the Reagan White House, I had a lot of time on my hands because I shared an office with a very smart lawyer. His name is Roberts, and he's now the Chief Justice of the United States. And off he went to do all the work, and the rest of us sort of wandered around the White House. And Mother Teresa came to the White House in 1986, and I went to see her in the Rose Garden, near to you. And young Catholic kid, really excited to see Mother Teresa. And out she came, and the president came out and gave a great speech and put that medal on that little nun's shoulders. And he said to her, would you like to say anything? she looked up at him and said, "Mr. President, I need more money." And I've always thought since then that if you believe in what you're doing, you can ask people for money. So I know it's one of the hardest things for elected officials who know how tough it is out there, who know that it's, in California, it's near $5 a gallon of gas. I'm sure it's not any cheaper here, to go out to their constituents who are working hard and stretching pennies and trying to make businesses go and say, "I need more money." But we really do need more money, and I thank those of you who contributed, and those of you who haven't, please consider doing so. And if you've already contributed, maybe give a little bit more or double it. You know, the maximum is $2,500 per person. We don't want Jonathan to break any laws. But this could be, in fact, there are 3 races in the congressional district, maybe 4 I'm hearing. There could be 1,000-vote races, maybe 100-vote races. And it will be very, very disappointing if we wake up on November 7th and we've lost control of the House by 1 seat, or we failed to pick up 3 seats in Arizona that we could have had but for 300 votes. And those 300 votes simply require, you don't buy votes, you just tell people about why you're running, and you tell people about Mr. Patrick's record. Jonathan was talking about, I mean, if you did not want to serve in one Congress of the United States at the 2009-2010 Congress, they did more damage to this country. I think you were probably thinking of Dodd-Frank when you came up with something to remember. Dodd-Frank, the stimulus, Obamacare, you name it, they broke it. And they broke it in record time, they broke it in less than 20 months, and they broke the country in the course of doing so, and they put in place spending trends which have raised us to trillion-dollar deficits every single year. I never used to worry about the deficit. People who've listened to my radio show for 12 years laugh at me because I used to say, I just didn't care about a deficit if it was under 3% GDP. I always assumed we could grow faster than 3% GDP. But we're at 10% and headed to 11% GDP. You can't do that. At some point, someone says to your currency, "We're not going to buy your debt anymore." And the moment that happens, the bond pirates arrive. I got a bunch of bond guys out in my home in Orange County from PIMCO, and they've been screaming from the top of their rooftops, "Be careful, the American debt is going to collapse." And when it does, the inflationary spiral and the interest rates we're going to have to pay start to kick in, and then you start to pay more on the debt, which costs us $300 billion a year. And before you know it, you're Greece. And so when Mitt Romney goes out there and says, "We're looking at Greece," and people laugh at him, I say, "You really?" From someone who never cared about this stuff. I was with Dick Cheney. It just didn't matter. We are now courting disaster. So that's a long-winded saying, a way of saying that this race matters a great deal. If we win it, we take a district that they thought they were going to get back by chicanery, and they think that they're going to win this thing on a head fake and a bluff and a promise of moderation, but they bring in Nancy Pelosi. If they break their will, they might change their party back. There might even be some ex-Democrats here. I was down at the fundraiser last night, and I was told, make sure you mention Sam Steger when I come up here, right? Sam Steger? And this is his hometown. This is where he was a genius. He said, "But you're not going to find any Democrats up there." I said, "I doubt that. I'll bet you Arizona has a bunch of old Reagan Democrats that are running around. They used to vote." Were any other Democrats here? Anyone who used to be a Democrat? Not even one will admit to it. No one voted for Jimmy Carter. There she is. She's up there. There's always a Democrat somewhere. Well, what happened is that 1976 to 1980 happened. And 1976 to 1980, as those of you who are my age or older can remember, Jimmy Carter was the president. We rode this country right off of a cliff. And Ronald Reagan came along, and he took all those Democrats who voted for Jimmy Carter, and he turned it into lifetime Reagan Democrats. Then they became Reagan Republicans. I think the same thing's going to happen. I think that people who voted for President Obama 4 years ago, there are a whole bunch of them who are waiting to vote for Mitt Romney, and that they're not going to change their vote after that. And it's going to bring along a new generation of talent. Paul was the vanguard. Jonathan is going to be the second wave of talent. And they're going to be there for a very long time, and they're going to keep us safe for 32 years, so until we do this again. It's something in America. We twitch every 32 years, and we throw ourselves onto the left's graces and their grip. But it will be a wonderful thing if on November the 7th we have Jonathan there for that reason. But for another reason, I've been happy to campaign for veterans of the military. Tom Cotton is running Arkansas. You met him yet, Jonathan? He's like you, one of the young guns. Tom Cotton is a 101st Airborne veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan, like Jonathan, a couple of tours. We've got Josh Mandel, who he's a Marine, and I married in a Marine Corps family, so we have to prefer Josh. And he's from Ohio, and he's going to be another combat veteran who's going in. We've got a few of them. Duncan Hunter has gone before, but we can't have enough of them. They're really rare, and it's extraordinary that we almost got to the point where there was no combat veteran in the United States Congress except for John Klein from Minnesota, and guys from World War II like Daniel Inouye. You know, they go way back, and so we are now refilling the coffer with people. And Paul's right. We need doctors. We do not need lawyers. We have lawyers. I speak against my own profession, and Angie's lawyer. She just argued in front of the state Supreme Court. But I'm telling you truthfully, we need doctors and we need military professionals to go in there. So you got a great one here. We're going to just take any questions you might want to throw at him, and I think you ought to ask Paul. I'll tell you, this is an aside. Running around with Paul 2 years ago, I didn't know, freshmen don't get the greatest assignments, right? They kind of say, here's what you're going to do, and you got to show a couple of times, you got to show up for 4 years. I think Jonathan's going to be able to skip that because he's been a prior elected official, and he's got military experience. He'll end up on armed services or some good committee. But I didn't know what they were going to do with Paul. And they put him over on governmental affairs, which is typically a pretty sleepy place. Right? It's not really where you go to get a lot of headlines generated. And Daryl Ice is a friend of mine, and I used to nudge Daryl a little bit, and he said, doggone it, don't you know it, 2 years later, and the two biggest investigations have been Fast and Furious, and now the Libyan embassy massacre. And Dr. Paul has been in both of those hearings. And I'll tell you, there are a legion of White House reporters and DC reporters who would give anything to ask him some questions right now, because he knows what's been going on inside of those hearing rooms. He was sitting there and watching what Joe Biden just lied through his very white, shiny, big teeth about on Tuesday night. You have the opportunity to ask him and Jonathan what he intends to do, so I won't take up any more of your time except to say thank you so much for coming out today and writing another check. Thank you.
Questions or comments or complaints, anything you might have. I do want to say one thing. There was one other person that is is one of the reasons why I was so excited to go to Prescott today, and that's my fiance Angie. The reason why is we got engaged in Sedona. And so that's going to be part of our trip today. And we're going to get married at Steve Pierce's ranch in Prescott in May 25th. So she's the most important lawyer in my life. And she did just, as Hugh was just saying, she did just complete her first argument before the Supreme Court. And now I know what she feels like when she watches me speak, because I was just rooting for her on the side, and it was wonderful to watch her do what she does best, which is keep bad guys in jail. So thank you. Any questions or comments? Yes.
How do we get rid of the FBI out of the United States and send them to Iraq and bring our troops back?
The FBI out of the
Well, they don't do anything for our borders. They're not doing anything about the 40 terrorist camps in this country. You know, let them go someplace. If they got all the equipment, let them go. Bring our troops back because they're getting all cut up.
You know, I've represented 3 border counties in the legislature, Cochise, Pima, and Santa Cruz counties. And I've got to say that when you look across the board at what's going on, people always ask me about border security and having served in the military. There's one person in this country that's never failed us. You look at all the leaders that we have, they've all made mistakes, they've all done things that we don't like. But there's one person in this country that has never failed us, and that's the American soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine, and we need to get the National Guard on the border. I look at at what's happening there, and I actually had the opportunity in the Senate, the state Senate, to testify in front of Congress. And it was interesting because before I was to do it, Jeff Flake called me and said, there's going to be this hearing. This is when the Democrats control Congress. And they want you to come out to, we have one minority witness, that would be a Republican, basically, one Republican witness to come out and testify. And I said, well, what's the hearing all about? And he said, well, we're really not sure yet. because they haven't told us the whole thing, but it's going to have to do something with guns and immigration. And I said, okay. And he said, I said, well, when do you want me to leave? And he said, well, that's the problem. The hearing is on, this was on Monday, the hearing's on Wednesday, you need to leave tomorrow morning. And I said, well, how am I going to prepare my remarks to fly out there? And he said, well, you can do that on the plane. And that's exactly what I did. I testified basically on behalf of the NRA and our border counties. And the theme of that hearing, which was really interesting considering what Paul's doing now, was guns, drugs, and violence are U.S. inputs that cause. What that really means is, how is it the United States' fault if there's violence and guns in Mexico? That was the precursor to Fast and Furious. And the person that they had me talk to before I left was a guy by the name of Bill Newell. And he was the director of the Phoenix ATF at that time that had authorized this operation. That was all going on while I was en route to go to Washington, D.C. And when I got there, I testified. John Tierney, who's in the race of his life right now because of a scandal involving his wife and gambling and all kinds of interesting things, was the chairman of the committee, and he interviewed me and these other two witnesses. And they said, well, what's your solution to stopping all these guns from going into Mexico and all this violence going on in Mexico? I wish I knew then what I know now, which is, well, just stop sending them the guns from the United States government. That would have been a good solution. And one of the things that I mentioned is that it's interesting, if you go into this country from Mexico, all the checkpoints that you go through, there's the aerostat in the air, there's the dogs, there's all of this whole apparatus that we put in place to protect this country. But when you go into Mexico, what do you go through? You go through a turnstile. There is no border security whatsoever. And here's the interesting thing. The same people that they say that are bringing guns and cash into Mexico, they're the same people who are bringing people and bringing drugs in the United States. If they would pay at least a little bit of attention to their border security, we could get the same people that are doing bad things in both countries. So when I talked to them, they didn't listen to me whatsoever. They said we need to do everything we can to reinstate the assault weapons ban. We need to do everything we can to stop any guns from going into Mexico by shutting down manufacture and sale of weapons in the United States. And that's exactly what led ultimately to Fast and Furious, that mindset. It had nothing to do with violence in Mexico. It had everything to do with people wanting to take away your Second Amendment rights. So other questions you might have? Sorry.
The other thing is when you want to change, you need to change right now from the top down. That means this president's giving these orders. You have to get rid of him. It means you hold people accountable like Eric Holder. And I mean you hold them accountable. They're no different than anybody else. They've committed crimes and they need to go in front of a jury of their peers to stand trial based upon those crimes. That's what you do. You know, are you ashamed? I'm ashamed that we couldn't go into a crime scene for 3 weeks. For 3 weeks? Think about Ronald Reagan being in the White House. If that would have happened, it would have been instantaneous. That's what's so sad. That's what's happening now is we're leading from behind. I don't know what that term means, but I know it's bad, and we got to get back to where we lead from the front.
Well, the federal government has been suing our state and our sheriffs, you know, for protecting our country.
No, let's make it real. Let's take it a step further. It's the Obama administration that's suing this state and our state. This has been a war on Arizona, and I'm dead on when I've said that. You know, when you look at it from withdrawal, our mining, our forests, you know, from our border security, all the way across the board, this administration has taken on. And you know why? Tell me the state that's using its voice to speak up. It's Arizona. We're known for it. You know, you have to know your heritage. You know, when we came into this country, we came in kicking and screaming. We wanted to do things, holding judges accountable. So we rebelled. Why would we be any different going into our second 100 years? I'm so proud of that, I can't tell you. And you know, I get lots of comments from my colleagues. God, what's going on in Arizona? Can we get some of that water?
get put down for sticking up for our rights.
I'm actually the reason why we're getting sued on another one. I'm actually kind of proud of this. We're sued by the Obama administration. It's kind of a neat thing in a sense. We have a new change to our state constitution that happened in the last election cycle. It's called the Save Our Secret Ballot, and it says that in our state, in order to have a union, you have to have a secret ballot vote. You can't just have card check. So the Goldwater Institute approached me when I was in the legislature. I sponsored the measure, and that is now, it was passed overwhelmingly by the people. 75% of non-union households supported it in all of our polling. 85% of all union households supported it in all of our polling. And it was overwhelming. Well, the National Labor Relations Board is suing the state of Arizona. We were just affirmed, believe it or not, by the Ninth Circuit in that lawsuit, which is kind of astonishing. And it is going to be a landmark case because I think it will ultimately go to the Supreme Court. And if you remember back in history, I think it was in the 40s, we had one of the reasons how we lost a lot of our 10th Amendment rights, in my opinion, was a case of the NLRB versus U.S. Steel, which sort of gave them the ability to start regulating labor relations in each of the individual states. This is sort of a chance for us to right that ship and right that wrong. So that is Arizona is on the forefront. It's the tip of the spear in all of these different issues. And people say that we have a war on coal. The reality is it's a war on Arizona. Our coal plants, our stance on immigration, our stance on 10th Amendment rights, that's because Arizona has really been aggressive and had a legislature that was willing to stand up for the 10th Amendment for the people of the state.
I want to add one other thing. You know, no one ever brings this up, but when Jan Brewer came over to California, I introduced her as, you know about immigration, and you know about the border, and you know about Fast and Furious. What you don't know is that Arizona has the most comprehensive education reform in the United States. It is destroying the National Education Association from the inside because of your charter school law. And the NEA hates Arizona. And that's, I serve on the board of Great Hearts, Arizona. This school system over here, there's 6,000 kids in it. There's 6,000 kids waiting to get into it. It is the future of education reform. No one ever hears that, but Arizona gets in the grill of every large interest group, and they do not like you guys. So I'm glad to be over here.
Private school tuition tax credits, we've got charter schools, we have school choice in the sense that you're not locked into one school, you can go to another public school as well of your choice. So it is at the forefront, it's at the vanguard. And here's the thing, we don't need the federal government to do that either. We're doing it in our own state where education belongs. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Two questions or two comments, I guess. One, why are we still supporting the United Nations when they all vote against us and we're the main supporter of that organization? Where can it come from Congress to say, hey, enough is enough, let's get out of that organization, pack up your bags and leave?
I think that's Paul's fault, actually.
Well, just to answer that question real quick, the House has asked for a number of things from the United Nations. In fact, we overpaid the United Nations by some over $100 billion, and they refused to return it. The problem that you have there is that you may not like what Congress has done, but there's a real delineation here. The House has done its stand. We have taken over 1,600 votes this year. We have good legislation standing on reforming of the United Nations and holding them accountable. The problem that you have is all of those have died in the footsteps of the Senate. Point blank, all your great ideas are being put into legislation by numerous freshmen and colleagues of mine in the House. So now what you need is, you got 3 opportunities. Not only Jeff Flake, but Dean Heller in Nevada. You also got Heather Wilson right here in New Mexico. She's running behind, but she's making up ground. These are opportunities that you get once in a lifetime to start making a change. But it starts with taking back the Senate.
Second question is the drug situation is bad. That's what's causing the border problem. They're coming across, and we're supposedly they're sending guns down, but I don't believe that. What can we do about the drug situation? You read the paper, and there's all sorts of methamphetamine, marijuana, any drug you want to name is coming across the border. How are they getting across the border without us getting stopped? And what do we do about our population in telling them how bad drugs are for them and getting that changed around? Because the money we're sending to Mexico is coming from people who are using drugs here.
Well, one of the answers to it is, well, there's a lot of answers, but it all boils down to border security and also federal law and how they approach a lot of things. This is a fascinating thing. When I served, we got a call from Larry Deaver when he was alive. He called me and he said, we've got a problem in Cochise County. The federal government has said that, has demanded that we prosecute, we should be the ones that prosecute all drug crimes that are 500 pounds and above. And so they had these bales of marijuana that would go through that were 500 pounds and above. I'm sorry, anything below 500 pounds that they would prosecute. Well, what they would do is the smugglers would have these bales that were all 495 pounds. And Cochise County is a small county. It barely has the budget to handle all the drug cases that it has anyway, and they were unable to prosecute. And if they didn't prosecute, then they would be losing even more federal funding for law enforcement for that area. They're simply, the reason why they have so many prosecutions is a geographical accident, that they're right next to the border with Mexico. Those drugs don't stay in Cochise County. Obviously, they're on their way to other parts of the country. And the federal government, not only do they not help them out in the first place with trying to make sure that they prosecute federal law, but they also have refused to secure the border, which is why they're able to come into the country at all. And there's a lot of problems. I talked about putting the National Guard on the border, and here's why. I believe in putting a fence. We made a commitment as a country to put in a fence, and we need to do that. But there's also a few problems in that you can have a fence, but you also have to have a road that would actually be able to go along where that fence is, so you can have access as soon as someone crosses over. Finally, if you have a fence, you don't have people there, it's like having a prison wall around the prison. It can be 50 feet high, but if you don't have guards on that wall, how long is it going to take for all the prisoners to get out? That's another problem that we have. That's something that the president could do tomorrow. The Cow Growers Association has released an 18-point plan. They've demanded that they actually live up to that, and they have not lived up to the commitment they have to secure our border, which is why we passed Senate Bill 1070 in the first place. It's a disaster, and I think that our government has ignored us. They want us to enforce laws on all over federal land, federal law on federal land. They try to get our sheriffs to do that, but then they won't enforce their own law, and when the United States or the individual states try to enforce that law on their own, they sue us. So we need leaders that are actually going to put a stop to that and do everything we can to fight against what the federal government has been doing to our state. Other questions? Yes?
First of all, we really appreciate our representatives standing in the way of the Obama administration when they can, and the inaction in Congress caused by that confrontation. I think, thank God for that. But what is it that allows the Senate to ignore the budget process for 4 years? How is that possible?
Well, I'll take a swing at that. The Constitution requires that all revenue bills be get in the House of Representatives, and so they appropriate and they pass it, and the House passed the budget. The Constitution does not require the Senate to pass the budget. That's the Budget Reconciliation Act of 1974, I believe. There was never a budget act until that time. And there is no penalty on the Senate for not passing the budget. So all that then happens, the budget's just a blueprint, and then they come up to the end of the year with these appropriations bills, and they can't get the Senate. The Senate wants a shutdown. Because of 1994, 1996, people remember that then the Republicans allowed the House to shut down the government, and the media flayed the Republicans alive. Speaker Gingrich was actually, 1995, devastated in his standing because of this. They want nothing more than a shutdown. So if Congress doesn't pass an appropriation, if the House doesn't pass an appropriation bill that the Senate likes, the Senate says shut the government down, the media will beat up on the Republicans. So the only way around this is to put the Senate back into Republican hands, and then the budget deficit will fall dramatically and immediately. But there is no sanction, and they want the only sanction, which is the government shuts down, so you go to the national parks and you can't get in, and you try and, they say you're shutting down the military. It's all just a giant media, Democratic fraud, but it works, and our guys are smart enough not to walk into that Box Canyon a second time. Arizona term for you, Box Canyon. I'm very proud of myself using that.
The second part to that is that when you don't go through regular order of all your appropriations bills and dictate where the money goes into a megabus or omnibus, and then the executive branch spends the money. So you're giving it over back to the
At the
executive
same
branch.
level.
Absolutely. And that's, when you're talking about border security, that's where you have to go back through regular order. And we have, what we've extended is working with our law enforcement folks to show us what programs work and what they don't, and empowering people to have some say in that. Budgets mean a lot to how you're going to spend your money and get results.
Jonathan, I just want to let you know we have time for one more question.
Okay. I want to say one thing about this race a little bit, so you kind of understand a little bit about where we're at. We've had a very good week. On Monday, a poll was released in this district. The NRCC released that poll. We are 5 points ahead currently in this district. I get a lot of questions. Well, tell us about this poll, how was it conducted, et cetera, et cetera. Here's the interesting thing about the poll. The poll actually was conducted with a turnout model from 2008. They used a turnout model from 2008. I don't know if you can go in the Wayback Machine, but that was not a good year for Republicans in 2008. If we're 5 points ahead using their turnout model of how many Republicans and Democrats and independents will show up to the polls, we're doing pretty darn good right now. Now, that can change. This is a volatile election cycle. I'm under no illusion. I'd like to take credit for that 5-point lead, and we've certainly worked hard, and we have an awesome team. We've done a good job. But part of it was the debate performance for Mitt Romney the week before. It has a big thing to do with it, because Republicans are all of a sudden energized. Conservatives are energized. Not all conservatives in this district are Republicans. Many of them are Democrats, as you were mentioning. We have a lot of, we call them Pinto Democrats in Arizona. And they have been voting traditionally Republican for the last several election cycles. Mitt Romney is ahead in this district. So is Jeff Flake is ahead in this district. And we're ahead in this district. And we either all succeed together or we all fail together. And the second big thing that happened was a great, it was one of the most interesting experiences I've had in politics, to debate Ann Kirkpatrick on last Thursday, and then go through the editorial process with the Arizona Republic editorial board the following day. Now, here's the thing. They said in their editorial that they wrote, they said we were all set to basically support Ann Kirkpatrick. If you read that editorial, it's fascinating. And then they say, but something happens sometimes in editorial board meetings that throws you a curveball. And they said that Ann Kirkpatrick essentially is not fit for office after what we saw in that editorial. I think that the exact one of the sentences was, for an hour and 15 minutes she berated, belittled, insulted, cut off her opponent for an hour and 15 minutes, and her tactics were not fitting of a United States representative. And people have asked me afterwards, well, did that really happen? And I was sitting there, and it really happened. I told my staff, I told Penny, I just called her up and I said, hey, you would not believe this editorial board meeting I had. And I think Penny thought I was probably kind of exaggerating a little bit. Well, now I've got a bunch of liberals on the editorial board that are actually agreeing with me that she really did act that way. And I think this is an important point to make, is that people assume because she says she's bipartisan and she says she's middle of the road, that she really is that way. Well, she wasn't that way in that editorial board meeting at all. And she gave us a glimpse into the kind of congresswoman she was before, and that she will be in the future. We're winning right now.
She will not be.
Well, absolutely. So that's where we're at right now. We are ahead. We've got more material than we know what to do with to touch base with the public about her, but we need the resources to get there. So I'm going to take one more question, and then we're going to go on the road. Yes, sir.
Suggestion on border control. Let's take all our surplus landmines, plant them along the border. One change, we take all the explosives out. We don't blow legs off. We replace it with bank robber orange dye. They come across, they hit a landmine, they're now orange. No more racial profiling.
We could just have, if you really wanted to show some, if you really wanted them to be afraid, we could take Paul's idea and have Nancy Pelosi in a box.
Scare the hell out of them.
Now, he was telling the truth when he said that she really is coming to the state of Arizona. And they're trying to do this as secretly as possible. They sent out a robocall to select few people, and they accidentally sent it to a Republican who called our office and emailed us the tape of them talking about her coming to Arizona. And she's going to be here on Wednesday. She's going to do a fundraiser in Phoenix for Ann Kirkpatrick. And you know, it was interesting when I was at the debate with her. I said, "You voted with Nancy Pelosi 86% of the time." And she says, "That's not true. I was voted one of the most rebellious members of Congress in the time that I was in office." And I said, "Well, if voting with Nancy Pelosi 86% of the time makes you a rebel, and I guess voting for Obamacare and for the stimulus makes you a downright revolutionary." That's what we've got. So thank you folks very much.
Good job.